Carnivore diet and fruit. Should you do it? Should you not? Is it a death sentence? Let's figure it out. If you're doing a carnivore diet and you've gotten to a point where you're lean and you're not really trying to lose weight and you want to just add some variety and enjoyment to your life and you like fruit, then I think that's a great thing to do. Of course, you could also add honey to this, fruit or honey, interchangeable. The thing I like about fruit is you don't run into a lot of the same digestive issues that you do with greens and other things. And obviously the oxalates, the toxins, and all the things that you get from greens that have been kind of demonized by the carnivore community. You don't really get that in fruit, but you do get fructose, sucrose, and these things generally lead to fat gain, especially if you're already eating a lot and consistently, and you're not doing multi-day fasts, you're not fasting as much as you should in general. This is where you can get into trouble. So it's something that you have to pay attention to. You have to modulate. But lately I've been eating a little bit more fruit. I'm kind of at a body weight and a leanness that I'm comfortable with, but how far I take it and what fruits, etc., I don't know. I'm still figuring that out, but I do have some thoughts on this. I do have some ways to think about this so that you can figure out if you want to add fruit to your carnivore diet and how to modulate it and maybe mix it up and how to understand your genetic past and how that might inform what fruits you should eat and how much or how little. And mostly the benefit is variety, because I was eating steak every single day and I still generally try to eat steak for my first meal. I can almost never eat steak for my second meal. It's this weird thing. My body doesn't want to eat steak for a second meal. Like, it just sounds gross to me, actually. I know that's blasphemy, but it does. If I have steak for breakfast and I eat my second meal 6 hours later when I usually do dinner, then steak just does not sound good. Maybe it's my body just making me eat other nutrients and kind of mix it up. I don't know, but that's the way it is for me. So I'm curious if that's for you as well. What I like about fruit is it's almost like ginger when you're eating sushi. It's supposed to cleanse the palate, and then you can kind of taste the next bite of fish, a roll, or whatever it is, and you can kind of get a clean palate to really embrace those flavors. This is maybe more of a metaphorical sense, because I'm not suggesting you should eat fruit and then eat steak and then eat fruit or whatever, but I find that adding a little bit of a mental cleanse, it's refreshing, it's sweet, it's bright, and sometimes it's acidic, and it just kind of breaks up the monotony a little bit. And so I think fruit can be a way to help you sustain a carnivore diet, at least trick your brain even in a way to make you feel like you have more variety than you even have, and just kind of keep you from going off those binges where you might buy an entire container of ice cream because your body is just like, your brain's just been craving that dopamine rush of sugar. And so this is kind of a mitigation strategy. If you're one that is sweet tooth like me, it can help curb that. All right, so here's some ways to think about it. Okay, the first things first. I believe, truly, I've heard this from other people, I've thought about it, I've read about it, and while I haven't really, read a book that connects these dots, from all the disparate sources of research and just myself and thinking about it, I have come to what I guess you could say is a theory. Your genes, based on your ancestors, determine how carb intolerant or intolerant you are. That's my theory. I'm not saying this is fact. I'm saying this is my theory here. And there's obviously a myriad of variables around this, but for the most part, if your ancestors lived closer to the equator, and generally, the closer you get to the equator, the darker your skin is, because the more melanin's in your skin, and if you're full-time in the sun, you're likely to have darker skin, etc. Okay? If your ancestors lived closer to the equator, so South America, Africa, certain parts of China, I guess Cambodia, Vietnam, go across the equator, it's likely you can eat more carbs and your body will respond favorably, meaning maybe you metabolize them better, maybe you can eat way more carbs and you don't gain fat, etc. The further you are away, so for a lot of us lighter skinned people that maybe have ancestors that lived in Northern Europe and fruit was just way more scarce, or maybe it was only available for like a month or two out of the year, you're going to be more carb intolerant. Again, this is my theory. I believe that the further you get away, and you can actually look at this data, like the Eskimos ate almost no vegetables or plants, right? Because they live in the freaking Arctic. They did eat some, but I'm saying they generally didn't eat many. So what did they eat? Mostly animal foods. As you go down from north towards equator, and we could probably map this, where all animal foods at the top because of environment, animal foods plus certain plants and fruits, and then you keep going down and you see it maybe shift to where at the equator, maybe you ate something like half animals, half plant foods. And of course, this is very much dependent on different regions around the world, etc. But you do see in tropical climates, you see a lot more consumption of starches and fruits. And this also applies to sweet potatoes, yams, etc. Now, without going into all the nuances of that and the different variables, I think this is a pretty safe heuristic. I've heard from some other people. For example, Dr. Ken Berry, his wife is, I believe, South American, Peruvian, I don't know, Mexican. I don't remember. Don't quote me on that. But she has South American descent. And so she's got a little bit darker skin. And she seems to do better with a little bit more fruit in her diet versus Ken, who's straight white, does better on almost a strictly carnivore-based diet. Now, I bet you if we did a study and we could actually control and do an interventional study where we took people of different races and we fed them, like 3 plates of food, and we mixed up, carnivore. Then we did, carnivore plus a third starch, 2/3 meat, then a third of, starch and fruit. And then we did like a 50-50. And then maybe we even went as far as to doing something like the Katavins, where we did, like 60 to 70% of the calories from carbohydrates, mostly yams and fruit, and then had a little bit of, fish and coconut and things like that. I think if you track that and you fed that to different people based on their genes, and you controlled for other variables, of course, and I think you would see, without a doubt, correlations between some people doing better on more carbs, less carbs, etc. So that's really, in a nutshell, how I think about all of the debate raging about carbs, sugar consumption, fruit, everything. That's what I believe. Now, I don't believe that a high carb, low fat diet is the most effective way. I will say that. I don't think it's the most effective way. I think you're always going to do better with more fat, more protein, and less garbage. That is just like one of those things. It's, again, if you compared them, it's like putting high performance fuel in versus unleaded, right? Like, you're just going to do better with the high performance fuel, no matter what your genes are or your heritage is. And so this is how you can think about it for yourself. Where you go with that, how much of each you eat, what you do with your diet, do you do a half carnivore diet, half something else? It's completely up to you. You could even just do this within just having, every so often having fruit for dessert, for example, if you want to just like add some variety. Now, also keep in mind, there's a couple of things here. If we're trying to think ancestrally, we have to keep a lot of things in mind. Our ancestors were always fasting for periods of time, sometimes for multiple days. So if you're not currently on an intermittent fasting routine and you're not getting multi-day fasts in every so often, then you're not going to be replicating what your ancestors would have done in the environment. And really, that's the goal. We're always trying to replicate what our ancestors did, because that's what's most optimal for us today, at least to an extent. Obviously, supplementation, training, and certain tracking, and there's certain things that we can take beyond what our ancestors did. But for the most part, the best chance we have for first principles of the best way to eat for our own biology is based on looking at our ancestors and trying to mimic that to a best of our ability, and then optimizing on top of that. Second thing, there would have always been seasonality in food, whether that is certain animals, fruits, tubers, whatever. There would have always been seasonality. Now people buy things from around the world, they have it shipped, and they can basically eat apples every day forever. And that's one of those first principles of the human metabolism and health is variability, okay? And then 3, no matter what, humans would have always highly valued and highly prized animal foods. They would have always opted for animal foods over plant foods, fruits, anything. To me, this is certain. It's not even up for debate at all. They would have also highly prized honey, but honey was very hard to come by. It was very scarce, and you usually had to climb up in a tree and get stung 1,000 times to even get it. So honey is kind of a special case scenario. And even when they had fruit, it was only available for a certain period of time. Of course, the closer you go to the equator, you could have had fruit year round. And so that changes things, of course. So I'm not giving you any hard and fast rules to think about this. I'm just giving you some general frameworks about how you could maybe think about this for yourself and then modulate, maybe like I said in the experiment with the different plates. Maybe you try 10% of your calories from fruit, and then you have some days where you don't do it at all. Maybe you have some days where you eat a lot more. Mix it up, add variability, have different fruits that are in season, and just test, tweak, and see what your body responds to. And obviously, if you start gaining weight and you want to curb that, then you curb your fruit intake back. The beautiful thing about a carnivore diet is you can get so in tune with your biology that you can kind of see in real time, oh, I'm getting a little bit adipose here, it's growing, I should probably cut on my fruit intake. And then you cut it back, it goes away, then you start eating fruit again, and you eat until enough's enough, and you just have a very solid feedback loop to connect what you eat to how your body responds. And what that does is it really gives you the power for controlling your health and your diet. And so let me know what you think about this video. This is just a quick intro to it. I might share some more experiences on eating fruit and carnivore and maybe some strategies for it or whatever. This is just a very broad view of how to think about this, including some of those first principles that I believe are universal for all humans. And so factor those in, factor in your heritage and your genes, then also test, right? This isn't a one size fits all answer. Just because you might have darker, lighter skin doesn't mean you can only or never do something, right? This is just to understand your biology so that you can perform an experiment and then get data and then iterate over and over and over again. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'll see you in the next one. Hey, Colin here. Got a freebie for you. Click on the button below to go to the ancestralmind.com and download the 7 principles of living wild. This is a short PDF that's got some of the main principles such as real food, sleep, movement, and a couple more that are going to help you live more ancestrally in accordance with your genes.